Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I'd review this little video and talk about this subject that I thought would be very particularly interesting. And of course, I've reviewed a lot of channels, within the past. I've reviewed Dante's Boxing Nation, I've reviewed Aki TV, Boxing Ego. I've reviewed, a couple of other ones that I'm probably not remembering at the moment. Blue Blood Sports TV, whatever it may be, the Bruce MF vein. But one of the channels that I have not not interviewed, but one of the channels that I have not reviewed as directly has been a boxing channel known as Fannon Boxing. I believe that his full channel name is Fannon International Boxing Channel. He's a channel, in my view, that kind of has his ups and downs in terms of certain biases he has or certain points overall that he makes. Of course, I remember when he was making a lot of those points when Deontay Wilder was allegedly getting cheated against that of a Tyson Fury. Of course, that was something that I never had personally agreed with, but it is what it is. But the question is, of course, that I'm going to be talking about today is, of course, about that great fight between Joseph Parker and Fabio Wardley, which, in my personal view, did end a little bit anticlimactically. And the reason why I say that is because, in my personal view, the fight, was not stopped in the proper way. Now, excuse me, would I state that it was the worst stoppage that I've ever seen? No, I wouldn't claim that it was as bad as, say, the Carl Frost versus George Groves fight. But interestingly enough, that was the same referee. I do not remember the dude's name, but that was the same exact referee overall who actually had refereed the Carl Frost and George Groves fight. So it's obvious that this referee that he has a history of early stoppages. And do I believe overall that that more than likely was on purpose, that he was the referee that was on purpose for this fight, just in case Fabio Wardley, who has a habit of coming on strong in the latter rounds and possibly getting the stoppage or hurting his opponents very badly, even if he's losing the majority of the rounds, do I think that that referee was placed there on purpose? Yes, personally, I do. Because I think if you're Frank Warren, or I think if you're one of those guys that if you want a winner out of any of these particular guys, that you want Fabio Wardley. Because Fabio Wardley is undefeated. He's younger. He's someone that I believe is still about 31 years old. And certain people, stated in my comment section, and they said, well, you're talking about Fabio Wardley like he's way younger than Joseph Parker, but he's only a couple of years younger. Well, in terms of boxing years, he really is way younger. And the reason why I claim that is because Joseph Parker really only has a limited amount of time left. I believe now after this fight, he has 40, boxing fights in his career. He's lost some of the bigger ones in his career to Dillian White and Anthony Joshua, and also that of a Joe Joyce when those guys were pretty much all at their best. Of course, he's won, some of the bigger fights in his career as well, like against Deontay Wilder and Martin McCauley and, Zhele Zhang and some of those guys. But, pretty much they know that Joseph Parker is someone that is somewhat expendable. Fabio Wardley is someone that could be a little bit bigger in terms of the potential because, A, he's undefeated and younger than that of a Joseph Parker. He also brings a very entertaining style, and B, he's also from Britain. So, I mean, it just is what it is. Now, the question is about Mr. Joseph Parker within this fight, and I predicted Joseph Parker to win the fight, and I think the fight was pretty much going how I thought exactly it was going to go, with Fabio Wardley having moments and it being competitive, but Joseph Parker mainly outworking him, outdoing him, and outboxing him, and Wardley kind of gassing out as the fight went along. But of course, the problem was is that Joseph Parker also gassed out majorly, which at times he has a problem doing in the latter rounds. But it probably had to do with a couple of factors. But we're going to talk about that as this video goes along. But that being stated, the question is about Mr. Joseph Parker. Did he get quote unquote robbed within this fight? I'm not going to claim that it was a robbery necessarily, but in my personal view, it was not one of the best stoppages that I had ever seen. When you have Joseph Parker that is up, in my view, by at the very least a few rounds within that fight, because Wardley was in the fight, but not by that much. Even Carl Frampton pretty much had the same exact score that I had, overall giving Wardley maybe one more round other than what I did. But it was clear that Joseph Parker was clearly winning this fight. He was just landing way too much. He was throwing way too much. He had the better jab. He was the better all-around boxer pretty much throughout the whole entire fight, although it was competitive in spots. But, it is what it is. But that being stated, let's see what Mr. Fannon has to state about this, because I thought that it was very particularly interesting. And we'll talk about how much of a chance does Fabio Wardley have against the great Alexander Usyk, because he is younger, he is someone that's stronger than Joseph Parker, and he is someone that, overall does have great power throughout a full 12 rounds. So we'll see what ends up happening. But that being stated, I'm also here to talk about, do I believe that Wardley or Parker would give Alexander Usyk a better fight? We'll talk about that as the video goes along. But that being stated, let's get into it. Let's answer the question and let's see what Mr. Fannon had to say.
All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fannon, and in this video, we're going to be somewhere where I don't like to go a lot, which is the heavyweight division. As Fabi.
Well, let me already intervene, and it's already been 12 seconds. A lot of these guys, especially a lot of these LDBC and new media guys, now to be fair, I don't know how much Fanon really associates with the LDBC or new media, but a lot of these, LDBC or new media or very, very racially motivated channels, to be fair, I don't know how racially motivated he is, but the last time that I seen of him, he was one of the few guys that was defending Deontay Wilder for allegedly getting cheated with no evidence whatsoever. So it did appear like he was very racially motivated in that situation. But pretty much a lot of these LDBC and new media channels, ever since, their king Deontay Wilder ended up getting dethroned, they've showed no interest in the heavyweight division whatsoever. They did not really comment on the Alexander Usyk versus Tyson Fury fight unless it was to embarrass Tyson Fury for being compared to Muhammad Ali. So when these guys say that they're quote-unquote boxing fans, they're really not. They're very, very racially motivated, and of course they want their favorite fighters to win, which of course is somewhat natural. Every, race of people, every ethnicity wants their people overall to be the most dominant at whatever they do. That's just natural. But at the end of the day, the point is don't sit here and tell me that you're all about objectivity or fighting against the double standards when pretty much any other fighter that is not of your demographic you try to tear down because you don't want them near the top. So, I mean, it is what it is, even if they have a great resume or a great career.
Wardley gets a very, very controversial stoppage over Joseph Parker in the UK in a very, very expected scenario. The reason why I don't like talking about the heavyweight division is that the heavyweight division is probably the most crooked division that there is in the sport of boxing.
I wonder why he could be saying that. Could this have any reason to deal with the fact that you're still not over that Deontay Wilder loss? I could be wrong about that, but I mean, it is what it is. Listen, I love the sport of boxing as a whole. It's debatably my favorite sport. But pretty much anyone who's been watching boxing for, I don't know, the past 70 plus years, we basically all know the writings on the wall. Boxing is hands down the most crooked fucking sport out of any sport. And all sport is a little bit crooked. Or all sports are a little bit crooked. Don't get it twisted. I've seen UFC fights that were obviously fixed. Baseball games, of course, or World Series in the past are obviously fixed. There was Pete Rose or whatever he did, gambling or betting on games, whatever. Football, of course, there's been certain things. The Patriots have gotten caught doing certain things. But there's not a sport that's even close, overall to boxing. No sport overall is as dirty or as crooked or overall as, basically degenerative as that of boxing. Basically, when I say degenerative, what I mean is that it is owned by a certain amount of degenerates, or was for a very long time behind the scenes by a lot of mobsters. Anyways.
They play games so much that you can predict what games they're going to play. And this one was a game for sure. Let's talk about that.
Well, what I'm going to say about Joseph Parker is this. And Joseph Parker is a very likable guy. He appears to be very nice, but, I'm going to say this about Joseph Parker, and I've been saying this about Parker for a very long time. He is a borderline great fighter, but his fan base has heavily overrated him for a very, very long time. And I'm not claiming overall that he is not a great fighter. He is. He did recently get a great streak over Zhang and Wilder and, of course, Martin McCauley. Now, that also being stated, let's also be real a little bit here. Deontay Wilder was not necessarily at peak form anymore, although he was the favorite in that fight. So if you still want to give Parker a lot of credit in that fight, then okay. But Martin McCauley, let's be real, he was not at peak form. Now, McCauley, I'm not sure if he would have won anyway because McCauley actually became a little bit overrated after that one win over Jared Big Baby Anderson. But that being stated, the only, 100%, prime peak form fighter that he really fought and beat recently was the fight that he got knocked down twice in against Zhale Zhang. Now, he still did beat Deontay Wilder, obviously, so I still give him a lot of credit for that, and Martin McCauley. But it was his job to come into this fight and win this fight dominantly without any doubts. Now, in my view, the fight was stopped way too early. Although, of course, he was up against the ropes for about half a minute, maybe a little bit more. But the point overall is that Joseph Parker was supposed to leave no doubts within this fight. And it was just a little bit puzzling to me. Like, why would you come in at the heaviest form that you've ever been And then on top of that, you apparently try to knock this guy out, like you try to knock his block off throughout the whole entire fight. Why on earth would you try to do that? It makes no sense. Fabio Worthy is a guy that tires out as the fight goes along. And on top of that, you weigh just as much as him. Why on earth would you be trying to outcompete him by 15 pounds and you've never been at that weight before? It was really a poor error in judgment, in my personal view, from his team and him. Oftentimes, gaining a little bit of weight, it's not that big of a deal. But if you gain too much, and Parker is someone that he oftentimes gets credited with a great amount of stamina, but if he really fights a true fighter that knows how to give him problems, he will gas out a little bit as the fight goes along, or he will, excuse me, he will show a lot of problems. As shown against Derek Chisora in the first fight, as shown against Dillian White, as shown overall against that, I believe, what's his name? What was the other fighter overall that beat him? I believe Dillian White. But anyway.
In this video, all right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fannon. In this video, we're going to be in the heavyweight division where Joseph Parker predictably loses his title, or loses, not his title, loses his position in the heavyweight division to Fabio Wardley after a controversial stop.
Well, as I stated in my fight prediction, I was predicting Joseph Parker to win this fight by unanimous decision, which is pretty much the way the fight was going. And I think that Joseph Parker would have been able to survive past that of the 11th round. But of course, the referee pretty much stopped it right around when Joseph Parker was coming back into the fight. Do I believe that that referee once again was placed there on purpose? Yes, I do. Because once again, I do believe that they were more fond of Fabio Worthy either getting the decision or getting the fight. And, but I stated, in my fight prediction that Parker was going to have to leave no doubts because Fabio Worthy was the guy that they really wanted to win this fight. And unfortunately for Parker, he did not do enough diligence. Although I do think he got a bit screwed, he still should have taken, better routes. But anyway.
But more than that.
And that's the thing that every boxer needs to realize when you are the A side and when you are not the A side. And when you're someone like a Joseph Parker that has about 40 fights on your record, you've lost some of the bigger fights in your career, although you're on a great win streak as of right now, but you're facing a guy that is from one of the great kingdom nations of boxing. If you're facing a fighter that is from one of the major empires of boxing, like if you're facing them from Mexico or the USA or, that's of Britain, something like that, fighters to where they can be, not only very talented, but have a rich history of boxing or sports, but then on top of that can be big stars. Those are the guys that you have to make sure that you don't fuck up against the most, because those are the guys overall that they want to push, that they want to become bigger stars a little bit later on. Joseph Parker is from, a boxing or a fighting country to a degree, but he's from New Zealand. At the end of the day, he's from a place that, they have blips on the radar every once in a while, but they're never looked at as the main, overall creme de la creme. So Joseph Parker needed to leave no doubts in this fight. So although I do think that it was stopped early, you do have to blame Joseph Parker to a certain degree. It was not great tactics at certain times in my personal view. Gaining an extra 15 to 20 pounds in my view was absolutely stupid in my view for no reason whatsoever. I mean, what was the reason? I guess to overpower him or something, but it's not like you were really using him or, doing a lot in the clinch. So, I mean, there was none of that. So I only have to assume that you were trying to knock him out, which in my personal view was absolutely stupendously dumb because Fabio Wardley is a guy that has a great chin. And on top of that, he's someone that has 12 rounds of power. He doesn't always have great stamina, but he's someone that has 12 rounds of power, a lot like a Deontay Wilder. Fabio Worthy is almost like a more technical British, smaller version of Deontay Wilder. That's kind of what he is.
The fight itself was controversial because it never should have had to happen. Before I get into that, though, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are new to the channel, please accept my invitation to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. And if you're a longtime subscriber and supporter of the channel, thank you guys so much for what you do. It really makes a huge difference, especially the people that support in the super thanks of videos like this, because $1 like 100 views. $10 is like 100 is 1,000 views, and so on and so forth. So thank you to everybody that chips in and supports the channel so that we can keep it rolling. But let's get into this, man, because look, the heavyweight division is literally.
So what are the penalties for...
The heavyweight division is literally owned by the UK, and they go out of their way and box.
Well, the heavyweight division has pretty much been owned either by the UK or America probably for the past, I don't know how many years, at least in terms of people that they really want to be the biggest stars. And of course, you know, that's why when Vladimir Klitschko, when he finally was dethroned by Tyson Fury, there was so much more intrigue by that. Because not only was there an Eastern European fighter finally off the block, but no offense against Vladimir Klitschko, but he was not really a part of the most talented era. There are many people, of course, saying that Alexander Usyk is not a part of a talented era and that these guys are bums. Actually, no, Usyk is probably in one of the stronger heavyweight eras of recent history. You know, because you have guys like Joseph Parker, even Fabio Wardley and Moses Itama are serious threats. Ajit Kabayel. You had Tyson Fury and AJ, who were legitimate unified champions at one point in time. Deontay Wilder, who was a threat. Dillian White, other guys like that. Daniel Dubois, who proved to be worth something. So no, actually, this heavyweight era is very, very strong. Now, if you want to claim that they're not quite as skilled as some of the fighters from the 90s, you can claim that. But I can name you a dozen fighters from the 90s or the 80s overall that were champions that probably would not even be champions today. You know, like Oliver McCall, debatably, or James Bone Crusher Smith, or Frank Bruno, or certain guys like that. Like, those guys were not great fighters. It is what it is. Pinkerton Thomas, I think, or certain guys like that. It's whatever. But the point is that overall that they pretty much have owned it. But Alexander Usyk may have just put Eastern Europe a little bit more on the map. Because Usyk has become a little bit more of a star because he basically has dethroned all of the big stars that he's needed to. And on top of that, he also has great charisma and personality and speaks good enough English. So Usyk is someone that you can kind of package behind a little bit. But they did try, you know, to give AJ and Tyson Fury those fights. They did try. Because the first fight was a split decision, you know, and the second fight against AJ was a split decision as well. You know, now the first fight, when I say first fight, I'm talking about Tyson Fury. And I thought that Usyk clearly won both of those fights. Although the first fight against Fury, I think, was a bit closer than what the AJ fights were. But anyway.
Goes out of their way to ensure that those titles stay in the UK. This is my opinion, and I knew it was going to happen before this fight took place with Wardley and Joseph Parker. First,
well, I already stated in my fight prediction that if this fight was super, super close, which I did not think that it was going to be, I thought that there was going to be competitive moments, but I thought that Parker was mainly going to outbox him, which pretty much was happening. I think I already had Parker winning about 7-8 rounds probably of the fight, you know, before the stoppage, you know, probably about 7, because of course 10 rounds had already happened, and you know, I think I gave Ward the rounds, you know, I think I gave him 2 of the first 4, and then I definitely gave him round 10 because he was starting to turn it up a little bit. But the commentary, I think, also was definitely trying to make Wardley seem a little bit better than what he actually was. But anyway.
Things first.
But like I stated, if this fight was even relatively close on the cards, or if it was a fight that could have went either way, they were going to give it to Wardley. So Parker needed to make sure that that didn't happen. Unfortunately for him, I do think that he got a little bit screwed over. But he also needed to make sure that, you know, that he needed to make sure that this was a conclusive victory. And unfortunately for him, he did not realize that he was not the A side.
Why this fight should have never had to take place, at least not at this time. It is because Joseph Parker deserved a fight with Alexander Usyk.
I agree he did deserve a fight with Alexander Usyk, but if you're Alexander Usyk, you know, you're probably actually ecstatic that this ended up happening. Because Alexander Usyk, I don't think, was very interested in a Joseph Parker fight, not because he's afraid of him, in my personal view. If you're an Alexander Usyk, and if you take a look at Joseph Parker, I don't really know what Joseph Parker actually brings to the table that is going to beat Alexander Usyk. That being stated, I don't think Fabio Wardley brings anything to the table that's going to beat Alexander Usyk either. He does not move his head off the center line very well. He keeps his hands down very, very low. He can tire out. Now, he does have power throughout a full 12 rounds, but when you're fighting a fighter like Alexander Usyk that makes you move to a certain degree like you've never moved before, that can tire you out even more. And then on top of that, he hits you in certain areas that you've never been hit before, or in ways that you've never been hit before, where you're like, wow, like this guy has hit me and I've never been hit like this before. How the hell is he doing this? So that takes a little bit more out of the mental stamina. There's a very decent chance that Alexander Usyk, in my view, could actually stop that of a Fabio Wardley. Now, certain people have debated, who in their personal view would give more of a tough fight to Alexander Usyk. I'm not really sure. In my personal view, they pretty much would give about the same fight. Both Parker and Wardley are known to tire out. Parker, of course, I think is probably the more all-around skilled fighter, but I don't think he has a type of style to beat that of an Usyk. I don't think that he has enough volume, at least at certain times. I don't think that he has a great enough defense, and he's also someone that, especially if you really know how to battle him, that he does show holes in his game. I think Usyk would have got to him eventually. Now, I think Parker probably would have been, the more challenging fight, but you never know. Wardley may show up against Usyk, and he may catch him with the right punch and possibly knock him out. I don't know. We'll see.
He beat Deontay Wilder. He beat Zhilei Zhang. He beat everybody nobody had more significant and consistent wins over the last several years than Joseph Parker.
Well, let's not say several years, because when we say several years, we're talking about 3 more years. Joseph Parker, for the past couple of years, has been on a very great streak. But not too long before that, he had a very dominant and, very bad stoppage loss against that of a Joe Joyce. So let's not say the past several years. But he was on a great streak. He was probably on the best streak out of any other current heavyweight at the moment, and he deserved that title shot. But if you're Alexander Usyk, I think that you honestly want the Fabio Wardley fight a little bit more, because he's looked at as younger, he's looked at as fresher, he's a bigger type of star. So many people may take a look at him as a more entertaining fighter, and then maybe you can fight Joseph Parker after this anyway. Unfortunately for Joseph Parker, I just don't know if he's going to get back in the title picture unless Usyk just really wants to face him, because who can Joseph Parker really beat in order to confirmingly, in order to get a confirmed title shot? Is he going to beat guys like Ajit Kabayel? Is he going to beat Danny Dubois? Is he going to beat certain guys like that? I mean, it's possible, but those fights are also very losable. And in my personal view, I would not favor Joseph Parker over Ajit Kabayel. I think Kabayel would stop him, just in my view. I think he's a terrible matchup for Joseph Parker. As for Danny Dubois, that's a fight that could potentially go either way. But I would probably slightly favor Danny Dubois, just to a slight degree. And there's some other fights that, could go either way, of course, as well. But anyway.
Other than Alexander Usyk, the undisputed champion. But guess what? Joseph Parker has a problem. Joseph Parker is not from the UK. Look at
Agreed. And he's not from the USA. He's also not from Mexico. He's not from Puerto Rico. He's not from one of these major places to where they want to promote you, because they know that they can have millions of fans behind you. And that's pretty much what it's about at the end of the day. Who can we promote? Who are going to be our new golden boys? Who can we get the most amount of money off of? And that's whoever ends up winning the close fights, or if they have to overall possibly get it to them, sometimes either by hook or by crook, they will give it to them because they say, okay, this guy has more potential to earn us money later on down the line. That's what it's all about.
People that Anthony Joshua, that Alexander Usyk has to fight. He fights Daniel Dubois twice, even though there was no reason for a dang rematch between the two of them. He had to.
Well, let me give Danny Dubois overall a lot of credit, because one can argue that Danny Dubois was on just as good of a streak as what Joseph Parker was. Now, I understand that people will say, well, Joseph Parker beat Deontay Wilder and Bacoli, blah, blah, blah. Right, but he kind of beat Bacoli. Let's be real. Bacoli was nowhere near peak form in that fight. And then when we talk about Deontay Wilder, I'm not sure how good Deontay Wilder was really anymore. He looked like a complete shell of himself within that fight. Now, he did still have a lot of the same faults that he used to, but he also did not have the same pulling the trigger type of mentality, overall, and he just did not appear to have the same killer instinct. And when I say killer instinct, I'm not talking about he didn't have the heart for the sport. I'm not saying that. I think he still did, but he just didn't have the same mind anymore. He just wasn't quite the same. So, I mean, he beat Zhang, and that was a great fight, but it was also one to where he damn near lost that one as well. I mean, Danny Dubois, he beat Filip Pergovic, who was undefeated, I believe, at the time. He ended up beating AJ Anthony Joshua, who probably wasn't, as great anymore, but was on a 4-fight win streak, I believe. And then, of course, I believe he also beat Jarrell Big Baby Miller, which didn't seem big at the time, but then Jarrell Big Baby Miller got a controversial draw over Andrew Ruiz in a fight that he probably should have won. So, I mean, to be honest with you, Danny Dubois kind of came back and proved overall his grit.
Fight AJ twice, even though he mopped AJ the first time, and there was no real reason for a rematch. Then he had to fight Tyson Fury twice, even though he mopped
Well, the AJ Anthony Joshua rematch and the Tyson Fury rematches, those were always going to happen. Anyone, of course, that knows how the business works, we always knew that those fights were going to happen. At the end of the day, you don't have the certain amount of marketability and promotion behind those fighters that you do in putting millions of dollars behind them overall to not potentially have a rematch to not only A, have, another $1 million event or another, millions upon millions dollar event, but then on top of that, you want your highest level of payday fighters. You want them, to win. So I mean, it is what it is. But Alexander Usyk, credit to him, he showed both times against AJ and Tyson Fury that he was the clear winner.
Them the first time, and there was no real reason for the rematch, and they're still now trying to make a third fight between Alexander Usyk and Joseph and Tyson Fury. So it did not surprise me at all when Fabio Wardley.
He starts with selfless. Feel like him feel good about.
It did not surprise me at all when.
I apologize, by the way, for not having the ad blocker in here. I totally forgot to put it on, but I'm too far into the video right now, so I can't really put it on, but hopefully I'll make them as short as possible.
Fabio Wardley, who is from the UK, and Moses Atumwa started being talked about for getting shots at Alexander Usyk, while
Moses Itama, in my personal view, is the biggest threat to that of an Alexander Usyk. But I just don't see that fight happening the same way that I don't see Terence Crawford versus Jerome Boots Ennis more than likely happening, because I think that Jerome Boots Ennis is not, at times quite ready for a fight like that because he's a bit too inexperienced and young, and of course I think he looked towards other opportunities at certain times, and Crawford takes a look at him as someone that might be a little bit too big of a threat and unproven to fight him at this age and time in his career. At least that's the way that I've seen it. And I think that it's the same exact way with Usyk and Moses Itama. Usyk takes a look at Itama and he knows that in order to beat him, that he's going to have to be the absolute best version of himself because that dude is extremely talented. He's extremely fast. He's extremely powerful. He appears to have all the technical ability that he needs in order to possibly take over that of the heavyweight division. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But anyway,
while Joseph Parker's name was not mentioned as a potential opponent for Alexander Usyk unless he beat Fabio Wardley, which is why that BS stoppage of Fabio Wardley is so bad. Now, I do want to tell you though that as far as it goes with fast stoppages, the UK is notorious for stopping fights too fast. So
especially that referee. I mean, no offense, but you had a referee that probably had the worst. I mean, other than the Meldrick Taylor and Julio Cesar Chavez senior fight, that Carl Frost versus George Groves fight was the worst stoppage that I had ever seen overall within the past, I don't know how many years. And you have that particular referee for this fight with the fighter in Fabio Wardley, who's known to come on strong at times in latter rounds and possibly get the knockout even if he's losing rounds. It's very obvious that they set that up, but it is what it is. But it was Parker's responsibility to not put himself in that position.
I'm not getting on that particular judge. I'm not saying that judge did something that was like he was in on something or anything. I'm not saying that because I have watched.
It's possible that he was, though. Listen, there are certain referees, even the best of referees that you see, they are told by certain promoters or they are told by certain companies, look, we need this fighter overall to possibly win this fight, or it would be better for all of us, including you involved, if you want to stay overall on these fight promotions, if you want to stay on these big cards and keep getting exposure, and maybe, just maybe, I can give you a few extra zeros in your bank account, overall, or on that check, that you're about to get from us, if you possibly do some of the things that I say. And that happens with every sport in the world. That happens with the UFC, that happens with boxing, that happens everywhere. Because at the end of the day, every company and every sport wants their most profitable stars to be the most successful. It just makes the most sense. Literally and figuratively.
UK boxing for a long time, and those judges in the UK are very, very quick triggered when it comes to stopping fights when people are not throwing punches back. But if you watch that fight with Fabio Wardley and the exchanges that caused the stoppage, there was no reason to stop it because.
Well, my thing is this. Joseph Parker is clearly up within the fight. Now, that's not a complete argument overall to not stop a fight, but you let Joseph Parker take shots for about 20-some seconds, he does not fight back all that much. Then when he does start fighting back and it looks like he's about to regain his footing, he throws a combination, ties him up. I believe that Wardley throws like a 3-punch combination, something like that. I think like 1 or 2 land, but they don't land to the utmost degree. Then Parker evades the last one, and that's when you stop the fight. Like, to me, it kind of looked like he knew that Joseph Parker was possibly going to get back in it, and he said, nah, it's kind of time. Because if I wait any longer on this, then, I might fuck up the bag.
Only thing was happening, Joseph Parker was taking the...
And I could be wrong. Maybe that referee, he just prefers to do that. But in my personal view, there's a very high chance overall that I think that they selected this referee on purpose for the circumstances. I mean, it is what it is.
Shots well, and he was definitely buzzed, but he was tired, and he was, to a certain extent, allowing Wardley to punch himself out. So, boom, he now is gone. But again...
Well, Joseph Parker, in my view, he pretty much was... I don't know if I would completely use the argument that he was just letting Wardley tire himself out. I mean, you can state that if you want to, but I think that he was just recovering. And I mean, at the end of the day, Joseph Parker he was hurt, kind of in the first thing, but then he started recovering to a bit. Not all those punches were even landing in the first place. So, I mean, to me, it was a bad stoppage, but it is what it is.
Congratulations to Fannon.
Now, is it as bad, once again, as the Meldrick Taylor versus Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. fight? No. That was a awful stoppage. Is it as bad overall as the George Groves versus Carl Frosch fight? No. Those were probably the 2 worst stoppages that I've ever seen in history, at least for, like, big title fights. But, I mean, the thing overall is that this definitely was one of the worst stoppages I've seen in recent history. It's not, in my top 5 of all time or anything, and maybe not even in my top 10, but it definitely was stopped a bit too early. If you thought that the fight was stopped in time, I get it, because Parker was, taking certain shots, whether they were landing flush or not. I understand that. But Parker was just starting to get back into the fight, and then on top of that, he was clearly winning the fight. You let that round play out, just in my personal view.
Fabio Wardley. I like Fabio Wardley as a fighter. I've always liked Fabio as a fighter, so don't get me wrong. When people and think that Fannon just doesn't like UK heavyweights.
And it's not like Joseph Parker was like looking majorly bad on the ropes. Like, he was looking bad, but there was never at any point in my view where I said, oh man, he's about to get knocked out right now, at least for sure. Like, at least, in the latter part of it. Maybe in the early part, I was like, oh man, I don't know if he can make this. But in the latter part, it was very clear that he was starting to recover. So it's like, come on. Like, Tyson Fury looked way worse against that of an Alexander Usyk when he was, knocked down in that of the 9th round. He looked like he was about to be stopped. But, of course, the referee, jumped in and did a 10 count. And they did that on purpose because they did not want Tyson Fury to get knocked out within that fight. They probably wanted him, to win that fight. And they knew that if Tyson Fury was going to get knocked out in that fight, that would possibly ruin a rematch and that there may be no need for one. So they did a 10 count because they wanted it to go to the scorecards and they wanted to make it look very competitive so they can make a rematch, look needed. But anyways.
That's not the case. I don't like the establishment of the heavyweight division and how they are so intent on giving all of the opportunities at heavyweight shots to UK fighters. They do the same thing at 126 pounds when you had Leigh Wood and you had Mick Conlon and not Carl Frampton, but the other guy always reminds me of Carl Frampton. But none of these guys were particularly good.
I understand what you're trying to say. And the UK, of course, is definitely somewhat guilty for that. But let's also be real, man. So are other nations like, Mexico and the USA. Like, let's not, like many of these guys that criticize the UK fighters or their way of doing things, the USA is even responsible for more dirty shit. I mean, it is what it is. Like, people always have to say all this shit about, oh, well, fighters need to come to the US to prove themselves. Why? So they can get robbed like Lennox Lewis against Evander Holyfield or Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder. It's like, get the fuck out of here.
They were just all fighting each other and celebrating victories over each other. And that's what I think is the same situation going on with the heavyweight division. That's why Alexander Usyk could just move up from cruiserweight and run through all of them. The fact of the matter is, UK fighters are not that.
Let me overall rewind that.
Frampton, but the other guy always reminds me of Carl Frampton. But none of these guys were particularly good. They were just all fighting each other and celebrating victories over each other. And that's what I think is the same situation going on with the heavyweight division. That's why Alexander Usyk could just move up from cruiserweight and run through all of them.
Well, now you're starting to sound like a guy that is trying to diminish some of Alexander Usyk's accomplishments, which many of these guys, of course, have been doing and trying to say, ever since their god Deontay Wilder has gotten to throw in that seat. Usyk is just this guy overall that is just running through a weak heavyweight division, especially because, let's be real, and I'm not saying that Fannon is guilty of this necessarily, but a lot of these guys like Aki, TV, and Dante, we already know why they don't want Usyk to be ranked that highly, because they don't want any other race of fighters to be remembered as top 10 or top 20, because that would diminish, overall how many black fighters are within the top 10 or top 20 of all time, and that's understandable. But I'm not here to get into this racial bullshit. At the end of the day, Alexander Usyk is an all-time great level fighter. There's really no debate about it if you know boxing. He ran through a cruiserweight division that had a lot of undefeated, talented fighters like Murat Gassiev and Junior Dordikos, who of course got beat by Gassiev. He also beat Glowacki, I believe, or Glowacki. He also beat, a couple of other fighters, Michael Hunter, a few other guys that I'm not mentioning, and some other guys that were veterans there. Then he went up to heavyweight, beat AJ Anthony Joshua, beat Tyson Fury, the two best heavyweights of their era. Then he beat Danny Dubois. And if he ends up beating Fabio Worthy and, Joseph Parker, some of these other guys, he is going to be remembered as a debatable top 10 fighter of all time.
The matter is, UK fighters are not that good, but they are really.
That's not true. At the end of the day, if Tyson Fury can defeat guys like Vladimir Klitschko, and Deontay Wilder, and also Dillian White, he's a very great fighter. Same with AJ Anthony Joshua. He beat a lot of these great fighters. He beat Povetkin, he beat Klitschko when he had the last little bit of, fight left within him. I believe that he also beat Joseph Parker. He also beat Andrew Weiss in the rematch. He beat Dillian White, I believe, and a few other guys. So those guys were great fighters. And Dubois also beat a couple of very decent contenders as well. He beat Jarrell Big Baby Miller when he's still, it was overweight, but I mean, that's pretty much just another day for Jarrell Big Baby Miller. That man has been 400 pounds ever since he's been 5. So, I mean, it's whatever. Anyway.
Pushing for the heavyweight titles and all of them to stay there so that they can sell that stuff. But they're going to move it over to rehab. That's why they're doing that. But the heavyweight division is bad because the fighters are not very good. Even if you look at Deontay.
Well, I can't agree with that. When you talk about, once again, the heavyweight division, it's really spiked up in talent for the past, I don't know how many years. Really for the past, probably about past 10 years, the heavyweight division has really upped itself in terms of talent. And certain areas are just like that. It's about, pretty much, every 2 generations. The 2 generations are very talented because they kind of imprint, off of one another, or the second generation will imprint off of that past generation. Then they're kind of lost after that. And then overall, the new generation ends up coming in. We kind of seen that overall with former boxing. Like, Joe Louis, in my view, was kind of a part of a weak era. Just in my personal view, he wasn't a part of the strongest era. Rocky was, probably not a part of the strongest era either, but in my view, he kind of fought some of the better elite black fighters. But then after that, of course, you had, I believe, the Muhammad Ali era. Then after that, the Joe Frazier, George Foreman era. And then after that, you had the Larry Holmes era, which was a 3rd generation, but that era was not that particularly strong. And then you had the Mike Tyson era, which also was relatively weak, but then you had the 90s, which is a very strong era, I believe. And then, of course, in the early 2000s, it was relatively competitive, but that's when Klitschko was starting to get a rise. But that's when the era started to become weaker again, But I don't know. I mean, I guess to be honest, it kind of varies because, every once in a while it's 2 generations are strong, then the next one is weak, then it's 3 straight generations, then the next one is weak. So it kind of varies. So I guess there's no evidence for my theory overall right there. But the point overall is that when you talk about, this era, no, it's still a relatively strong era.
Deontay Wilder got put on the shelf permanently for losing to Joseph Parker. And I promise you, Joseph Parker's going to get permanently put on the shelf for losing to Fabio.
Well, Deontay Wilder actually really did not get permanently put on the shelf for losing to that of a Joseph Parker. The thing is that after he lost to Tyson Fury, he was supposed to beat Joseph Parker to potentially set him up with a super fight with AJ Anthony Joshua, so that's not the case. Deontay Wilder actually was supposed to do his job to make the AJ Anthony Joshua fight. Then he got dominated against a Parker who got knocked out against Joe Joyce not too long ago. And then overall, that's what ended up happening. And then even after that fight, he still got a top 10 contender fight against Zhele Zhang. So what you're saying right there, sir, makes no sense.
Wardley. There's not going to be any more. Okay, yeah, match up Joseph Parker with this guy. Now, he may go fight Derek Chisora or be on the undercard.
Well, my thing about Joseph Parker is this. Sometimes you have to take advantage of your heat, or sometimes you have to take advantage of your stock when it rises when you can, because there's no guarantee that there's going to be a title shot tomorrow. So it might have been actually better for Joseph Parker to kind of wait, but I get it because it didn't seem like Usyk was very, very interested, and this was a very winnable fight. But the gaining of weight, in my view, and the way that he was fighting throughout the fight, it was just incredibly stupid. Because although, of course, he was winning, overall, he needed to know that they were not looking for him to win this fight. So once again, anyway.
For some of these guys, but they are without a
And Joseph Parker, I mean, when I just take a look at it, is there a guarantee that he beats Ajay Cabello? Is there a guarantee that he beats Danny Dubois? Is there a guarantee that he even beats a Philip Hergovich? I'm not sure if he beats any of those guys. So the point overall is that, Joseph Parker, unfortunately, this might be, the end of his career in terms of title shots. He went on a great little streak, but unfortunately, he did not do his due diligence enough. Yes, I do think he kind of got screwed over, but he also fucked himself over a little bit as well. Anyway.
out ball hogging the heavyweight division. They did not give Deontay Wilder Deontay Wilder lost his WBC title. There is no chance ever that he's going to get a chance at another head shot. And if he does get it,
that doesn't make any sense when the man ended up getting a trilogy fight against Tyson Fury. Now, of course, one could state, well, that was in the contract. Fair enough. So then let's not even count that then. But then immediately afterwards, you get a big fight with Joseph Parker, a fight that is looked at as highly promotable. And that was pretty much to set up the AJ and Deontay Wilder fight. And you basically lose every single round, if not lose every single round. So enough of the fucking tears for Deontay Wilder. Wilder had multiple shots. Then he fights Zhale Zhang next in his fight. Gets knocked out within 5 rounds. Enough tears for this dude, Deontay Wilder. Pretty much the only dudes overall, let's be real, that pretty much give this dude a great amount of tears are his pro-blackity-black fan base that go along with the victimized mentality and just love to say about how victimized, black people or black fighters are 24/7. And don't get it twisted. I'm not claiming that black fighters or black people are not victimized or marginalized or held to higher standards at certain times, of course. But that doesn't mean that every situation is the same. And at the end of the day, Deontay Wilder had his opportunities. He squandered them.
was going to get a shot, he had to go through everything that Joseph Parker had to go through to not getting that shot. Because remember, Deontay Wilder and Joseph Parker fought each other, right? And Joseph.
Right, and what fight was that to set up, dude? It was to set up the AJ Anthony Joshua fight, which at the time would have not been a title fight, but it would have been a humongous fight, which at the very least would have given Deontay Wilder the possible opportunity to fight Tyson Fury or probably fight Alexander Usyk. It would have created a lot of attention. So at the end of the day, I'm sorry. I understand, but I'm not just going to sit back and say here like, oh, well, Deontay got screwed over because he didn't get an opportunity. No, he got his opportunity. He would have got a humongous super fight against AJ Anthony Joshua, the former unified champion, and he fucked that up.
Parker won. He continued to go on, aiming at a heavyweight title shot. But guess what? Neither one of those guys got the shot because neither one of those guys are from the UK because they're trying to have somebody they can sell into those audiences and they don't.
Right, but let's cut the bullshit about Deontay Wilder. Wilder basically got one of the easiest title shots of all fucking time, and then he was allowed to defend it against literally some of the biggest tomato cans that I've ever seen in my life. No offense. But enough of this Deontay Wilder or some of these US fighters, these USA fighters, they're so marginalized. All that is bullshit. The USA has been the recipient of some of the biggest advantages out of any other fighters within boxing history. Probably the most advantages, if we're going to be real. Which is why oftentimes they always want them to come over to the USA. Don't get it twisted. The USA, they also want them to come over here because that's oftentimes where the best fighters are in the world. And of course, that's where, you do your proving and where they can put on the biggest events. But it's also partially because they realize that, they could possibly give them a slight amount of favoritism over here. I mean, it is what it is. Anyways, but let's not do this bullshit with Deontay Wilder. He got his title shot against Bermane Stiverne. He was allowed to defend it against literal bums of the month like Artur Spilska, and Dominic Breazeale, and some of these other guys. Like, give me a fucking break. An older Chris Arreola. Like Deontay Wilder might have been the most fed champion that I've ever personally seen in my life.
American heavyweight, the title.
Other than Demetrius Andrade.
To come back to America. And they're going to do whatever they can to continue to sell that sham that they have the best heavyweights in the UK. When they really are just colluding with each other to make sure that nobody else gets shots but them for those titles. And I'm telling you, these guys are not top level world hit, like as far as the history of the sport of boxing, these guys suck. compared to the earlier generations of heavyweights. And I'm telling you,
Well, that depends overall on who you want to compare them to. I don't think anyone is going to take a look at Fabio Worthy and say, oh, wow, that dude's Muhammad Ali or that dude's Joe Frazier. But he's still someone that is very competent. He's someone that, once Alexander Usyk retires, I could easily see him winning a title. He's someone that could defeat some of these other guys. If Worthy ended up defeating, Philip Pergovich or Danny Dubois or some of these other guys, I want to be shell-shocked. So, I mean, let's not sit here and pretend like the heavyweight division, because they're full of Brits, that, it's just completely weak and all sort of bullshit. No, it's not.
there's going to be an American heavyweight that pops out.
And I've also stated this as well. Like, I've had people in my comment section saying, why do you say that Anthony Joshua is an all-time great heavyweight? He's no greater than a Frank Bruno. Well, how do we have really any evidence of that? Frank Bruno was someone that lost to a guy in James Bone Crusher Smith. Is James Bone Crusher Smith anyone that is anywhere near as talented as any of the guys that AJ ever lost to? Not even close. So, I mean, it just is what it is. AJ was able to defeat multiple fighters that are hands down greater than that of a James Bone Crusher Smith. Frank Bruno ended up winning the title over Oliver McCall, who probably never should have been a champion in the first place, but ended up getting that one great win over Lennox Lewis, I believe. Maybe another great win. I don't know. He was a Mike Tyson sparring partner, but pretty much in that fight against Frank Bruno, he got outboxed from what I remember, and then Frank Bruno ends up losing it when Mike Tyson comes back. So give me a fucking break about Frank Bruno. Frank Bruno was a guy that was always more of a hype job in my personal view. He was okay. He was never really that great. He came back. He won a title at one time in his career. Then he completely folded against Mike Tyson, then was never seen from again. AJ actually was able to defeat Andrew Ruiz, Alexander Povetkin, Dillian White, Joseph Parker, an older but, game Vladimir Klitschko. Like, he has several A-grade wins in his career. Frank Bruno does not.
That comes out, as long as he is not thrown to the wolves like Turkey Al-Sheikh convinced Jared Anderson to do to himself, as long as he is put in there in a situation where he is not.
Well, Jared Big Baby Anderson was in a 50-50 fight, in my personal view, against Martin McCauley, because McCauley had not really defeated anyone that was really that good up until that point. So the reason why Jared Big Baby Anderson lost that fight was not because, in my view, it was a little bit too early, but because he was just proven overall to not really be as good as what a lot of us thought he was. So I mean, it just is what it is. That being stated, Jared Big Baby Anderson, in my view, he can recover, but he's going to have to fix some of his faults.
Set up to lose like Jared Anderson was. Don't worry, we'll have good heavyweights again, but they may never get a title because they'll never let you know how good they are. Just look how they treat Gervonta Davis. Gervonta Davis is a...
Look how they treat Gervonta Tank Davis, who has fucked himself out of opportunity, out of opportunity, out of opportunity. Don't give me this, tear show about all these American fighters, dude. Gervonta Tank Davis has been the recipient of more promotion out of any other fighter that has more of a lacquer resume out of any other fighter I've seen within boxing history. Please, let's not talk about Gervonta, I duck everybody that's around me, Tavis. Get the fuck out of here.
Horrific fighter, exceptional fighter, exceptionally skilled fighter. Run his name in the mud as much as they possibly can. Anyway, that...
Gervonta Tank Davis has no one else to blame but himself for that. At the end of the day, when you've been presented with opportunities to possibly fight Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, and some of these other guys, and you don't seemingly want to chase any of them or fight any of them who are looked at as the biggest fights of your career, you're going to get criticized. At the end of the day, Gervonta Tank Davis is like, 31, 32 years old at this point, and he's someone over, maybe a little bit younger, I don't know, but I know he's at least for sure 30, I'm pretty sure. And what have you done in your career? The biggest win in your career is possibly over a Ryan Garcia, dude. And that guy's never even won an official title. He just lost to Rolly fucking Romero. So at the end of the day, it's like, what the fuck has Gervonta Tank Davis done? So let's please stop this bullshit about how American fighters are so marginalized, because it's actually quite the opposite. The American fighters out of any other nation, are the recipient of the most benefits and promotion out of any other nation. Now, am I claiming overall that black fighters are oftentimes treated fairly by a lot of their peers or by a lot of fans? No, of course not. But when you talk about the promotional value, like, come on.
My reaction to that Fabio Wardley win, congratulations to Fabio Wardley, though, because like I said, he's a good fighter. I like Fabio. Congratulations to him. If he fights Alexander Usyk, good luck to him. He's going to be like a 20-something-year-old guy fighting in late 20s. I think Fabio may be not that old. He's not.
I thought Fabio Worthy was 20-something as well. I was a little bit surprised to figure out that he was about 31 years of age. But anyway,
like as old as the rest of these guys fighting a 40-year-old Alexander Usyk.
But Fabio Worthy pretty much overall has a 20-something type of body for boxing, and the reason why I say that is because he doesn't have that much wear and tear on him. To be honest with you, the Joseph Parker fight and the Justice Sweeney fights, they probably gave him the most amount of wear and tear. He did have, I believe, a pretty tough fight against that one fighter, Clark Frazier, whatever his name was, but, that really wasn't supposed to happen in the first place. But anyway.
I'm sure at some point in time they will get all those belts back in the UK. Anyway, that's my take on the matter. Please let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Deuces.
But that pretty much is about it for today. And of course, we see the Deontay Wilder outro. But anyways, that being stated overall, I just wanted to talk about that. Thought it was interesting. But do I believe that Parker got robbed? I'm not gonna claim that he got robbed. I do think it was a bad stoppage. I do think that they clearly did want Fabio Worthy to win a bit more than vice versa. But I think that he got a bit screwed. I'm not gonna claim robbed necessarily because that would be something that would be, in my view, completely out of his hands. When someone gets robbed, in my personal view, that's something to where it's not even debatable, to where I'm like, wow, like there was nothing else that he could have done. I'm going to say that it was a bad stoppage, but Joseph Parker kind of fucked himself over a little bit as well by being the heaviest that he's ever been. There was really no reason to do that. You want to try to outspeed Worthy in the get-go anyway. And then on top of that, you have power already at 245. So what the fuck is what is the point, overall of gaining 15 plus pounds? He's a guy that has a great chin. You're not a volume enough fighter overall to do that throughout the whole entire fight. And he's a guy that has power throughout 12 rounds that could possibly stop you later on. I mean, I'm guessing that the mindset was that I don't want it to go into their hands. So I want to put on an impressive performance and possibly hurt him or stop him. But Joseph Parker does not have the gas tank to do that. A, to fight in that type of style. And then B, overall, once again, in order to gain that substantial amount of weight. Because anyone that has seen Parker in his previous fights knows that on the surface, if it's his preferred fight, then he prefers to, he looks to have a good gas tank, but he's not someone that has an amazing gas tank. And you can see that against Derek Chisora. You can see that also against Dillian White. You can see that, against that of a Joe Joyce and some of those other ones. But anyway, but that pretty much is about it for today. Unfortunate for Joseph Parker. I would still love to see the Usyk versus Parker fight because that would be another great fight and another great name that Usyk could potentially add to his resume. Someone that has several big A-grade level names in his career. Overall, and on top of that, someone that was a former champion. So I'd love to see both the Fabio Worthy fights and the Joseph Parker fights, but we'll see what Alexander Usyk does, because I'm not really quite sure what his plans are. But he states that he plans to fight about 4 or 5 more fights. I would love to see that, and I'll probably be doing a list about the top 5 fighters that I would love to see Alexander Usyk face next. That can probably be a very short video. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.